I drove by my son's office and stopped to say hello. In the lot, I saw my daughter-in-law's car in an executive spot, but she was on vacation in the Caribbean. Passing the meeting room, I overheard them talking and panicked when I realized what it was about. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I never intended to stop by the office that Thursday afternoon. The downtown traffic had been lighter than expected, and I found myself with 20 minutes to spare before my dentist appointment. The building that housed Serrano Agricultural Holdings, my company, though I'd handed day-to-day operations to my son Liam 3 years ago, sat on the corner of 5th and Madison, its glass facade reflecting the pale November sky. The parking lot was nearly empty at 2 in the afternoon. Most of the staff worked from the warehouse facilities 15 miles north, near the grain silos. Only essential management kept offices downtown. That's why my heart lurched when I spotted the silver Mercedes in the executive spot beside Liam's truck. The vanity plate read, Mersdan, my daughter-in-law Avery's car. I sat in my own vehicle, a modest Ford that Avery had once called charmingly vintage, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and stared at that Mercedes. Avery had left for Turks and Caicos 5 days ago. She'd posted photos on that Facebook thing just this morning. Turquoise water, white sand, a cocktail with a tiny umbrella. I remembered because my granddaughter Emma had shown me during our video call. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the steering wheel. 66 years of living had taught me that unexplained things usually had uncomfortable explanations. I should have driven away. Instead, I pulled into a visitor spot and walked toward the building's side entrance, the one that led directly to the administrative wing. My keycard still worked. Liam had insisted I keep it, though I rarely used it anymore. The hallway was quiet, carpeted in that industrial gray that showed no stains. Through the glass wall of the main conference room, I could see 2 figures. Liam, his back to me, shoulders tense beneath his tailored shirt, and Avery, very much not in the Caribbean, leaning against the table in a burgundy suit I'd never seen before. I should have announced myself. I should have knocked. Instead, I pressed myself against the wall beside the door, where the recessed water fountain created a small alcove. The door wasn't fully closed. Perhaps an inch of space remained, enough for their voices to carry. "Can't keep doing this," Liam was saying, his voice tight with stress. "She's not stupid, Avery. Your mother is 73 years old and trusts you completely." Avery's tone carried that particular sharpness I'd learned to recognize over 8 years of family dinners. "She signed everything over. She doesn't even look at the quarterly reports anymore." "I'm 66, not 73, I thought absurdly, my heart hammering against my ribs. "The consolidation has to happen by December 15th, Avery continued. "Richard confirmed the timeline. Once the assets transfer to the holding company, we can restructure without her signature." "It feels wrong." Liam's voice cracked slightly. "This is her life's work. Dad built this company from nothing, and she kept it going after he died. And now she's ready to enjoy retirement," Avery said smoothly. "We're not stealing anything, Liam. We're modernizing. Your mother doesn't understand vertical integration or market positioning. She still thinks we're a family farm." A cold sensation spread through my chest. We weren't a family farm. We'd stopped being that 30 years ago when my husband Robert and I had expanded into agricultural supply and land management. But we'd started as one. Robert's grandfather had broken the soil on 200 acres outside Millbrook in 1924. "The Portland deal," Liam began, "is necessary. The zoning change makes that land worth 40 times what she thinks. The residential development contract is already drawn up. The Portland property, 300 acres of prime farmland that Robert had purchased in 1998. Before the city sprawl had crept north, we'd leased it to organic farmers. I'd promised the Kowalski family they could renew their lease this spring. "She'll notice when the Kowalskis' lease isn't renewed," Liam said. "She'll notice when she's staring at a retirement home ceiling if we don't increase revenue," Avery snapped. "Your sister already thinks your mother is declining. One conversation with Wilma about confusion and memory issues, and we can move forward with the conservatorship papers." The water fountain hummed beside me, oblivious. My legs felt disconnected from my body. "I won't do that to her," Liam said, but his voice lacked conviction. You won't have to do anything. I'll talk to Wilma. She already agrees Mom's getting forgetful. Last month's incident with the checkbook. She transposed 2 numbers. Shows declining capacity. Richard says with both children in agreement, the court will grant temporary conservatorship within 6 weeks. Then we can make the necessary decisions without the emotional complications. I closed my eyes. The checkbook incident. I'd accidentally written a check for $150 instead of $1,500 to the church building fund, and had to write another. Wilma, my daughter, had been visiting that day. She'd made a joke about senior moments. I'd laughed. I need to think about this, Liam said. Think fast. The paperwork needs to be filed Monday. Richard's holding the documents at his office. Richard Townsend, our family attorney for 20 years. The man who'd handled Robert's estate, who'd helped me set up the trust, who I'd recommended to 3 other families. Footsteps approached the door. I moved quickly but quietly, slipping into the ladies' restroom across the hall just as the conference room door opened fully. I'll call you from the road, Avery said. The flight back to Miami leaves at 6. Post a few more beach photos tonight. This isn't right, Liam said again, but he was talking to her, retreating back. I stood in that restroom staring at my reflection in the mirror. Gray hair cut in a practical bob. Sensible shoes. The sapphire earrings Robert had given me for our 40th anniversary. I looked exactly like what I was. A widow in her 60s. Someone people smiled at kindly and spoke to slowly. Someone they thought they could erase with paperwork and legal maneuvers. My phone buzzed. A text from Wilma. Dinner Sunday? Want to talk about something important? I stared at that message for a long moment, understanding now what that something important would be. Concerned conversations about forgetfulness. Suggestions about assisted living. The gentle, inexorable process of being classified as incompetent. My hands had stopped shaking. Something cold and clear had settled in my chest, not panic, but purpose. I left the restroom and walked back toward the parking lot, moving quickly past the conference room. Through the glass, I could see Liam slumped at the table, his head in his hands. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to demand explanations. But 63 years of living had taught me another lesson. People revealed more when they thought they were unwatched. In my car, I sat for several minutes thinking. Then I pulled out my phone and made a call. Millbrook County Records Office. A cheerful voice answered. Hello, this is Evelyn Serrano. I need to request copies of all property filings and transfers for Serrano Agricultural Holdings over the past 6 months. Yes, I can come by tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock would be perfect. I made 2 more calls. One to my bank, requesting detailed statements for all accounts, and one to a number I'd kept in my wallet for 3 years but never used. Hammond Investigations. A gruff voice answered. Mr. Hammond, my name is Evelyn Serrano. A friend recommended you when her husband was hiding assets during their divorce. I may need your services. What kind of case, Mrs. Serrano? I looked at the office building, at my son's truck and my daughter-in-law's Mercedes parked side by side like co-conspirators. I need to know what's being done with my company, I said quietly, and I need to know who I can trust. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my car and allowed myself 1 minute of grief. Then I started the engine. I had a dentist appointment to keep, and after that, I had work to do. The game, I realized, had already been in play. I'd just been too trusting to see the board, but I was seeing it now. The Millbrook County Records Office smelled like old paper and fluorescent lighting. I arrived at 8:45 Friday morning, 15 minutes early, and waited on a wooden bench that had probably been installed during the Carter administration. The clerk, a young woman with purple-framed glasses, seemed surprised when I asked for physical copies rather than digital files. Most people just want the PDF emailed, she said. I prefer paper, I told her. My eyes aren't what they used to be. I smiled in that self-deprecating way older women are expected to smile, playing the role they'd assigned me. She brought me a manila folder 20 minutes later. There are quite a few transactions. Are you sure you need all of these? I'm sure. I paid the copying fee and took the folder to my car. Inside were 37 pages of recorded deeds, transfers, and amendments. I spread them across my passenger seat and began reading. The first irregularity appeared on page 4. A quitclaim deed transferring the Portland property from Serrano Agricultural Holdings into something called Serrano Family Trust LLC. The date was August 23rd, 3 months ago. My signature appeared at the bottom. I stared at that signature. The loops were right, the pressure similar, but I'd signed no such document. I was certain. Page 9 showed another transfer. The grain storage facility outside Millbrook moved into the same LLC. My signature again. September 14th. By page 15, I'd found 7 properties transferred out of the main company. Total value, based on our last assessment, approximately $18 million. My phone rang. Wilma's name flashed on the screen. "Mom, are you free for lunch today? I'm in town." "I have plans," I lied. "What about Sunday dinner? You mentioned wanting to talk." A pause. "Actually, Mom, that's what I wanted to discuss. Liam and I think we should have a family meeting, just the 3 of us." "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong. We just want to make sure that everything's being handled properly, with the business and your finances." The concern in her voice sounded genuine. It probably was. Wilma believed she was helping, protecting her aging mother from confusion and potential exploitation. She had no idea she was the weapon being wielded. "Sunday at 5, I said. "I'll make pot roast." After we hung up, I sat in the county parking lot and called Hammond Investigations. "I need to move faster than I thought," I told the investigator. "Can you meet today?" Tom Hammond looked nothing like I'd imagined. I'd pictured someone rough-edged, possibly drunk at 2 in the afternoon. Instead, the man who met me at the coffee shop on Elm Street wore khakis and a button-down shirt, had kind eyes, and ordered chamomile tea. "My wife's trying to get me off caffeine," he explained. "Says I'm too tense." I showed him the property records. He studied them for 10 minutes without speaking, occasionally making notes in a small leather notebook. "These signatures?" he finally said. "You're saying they're not yours?" "I never signed those documents. I never authorized those transfers." "But they look like your signature." "They do. Forgery is hard to prove," Hammond said carefully, "especially if whoever did it had access to legitimate signatures to practice from. And if your son has power of attorney, he doesn't. I never granted that." Hammond's eyebrows rose. "You're sure?" "I'm 66 years old, Mr. Hammond, not senile. I know what I've signed." "No offense intended, Mrs. Serrano. But that's exactly what a lawyer would argue, that you don't remember granting it, especially if your own children testify that you've been forgetful." I felt the walls closing in already. "What do I do?" "First, we verify. I'll need access to your safe deposit box, your files at home, anywhere you keep important documents. We need to confirm there's no power of attorney you forgot about." "There isn't." "Then we need to figure out how they're doing this. Who has access to company documents? Who can authorize transfers?" "Liam is president. He has signature authority for operational matters. But major asset transfers require my approval as majority shareholder." "Do you review everything you sign?" I hesitated. That hesitation was damning. "I trust my son," I said quietly. Trusted him. He brings me papers during Sunday dinners. I read them, or I skim them. Quarterly reports, vendor agreements, lease renewals. "And you sign them?" "Yes." Hammond nodded slowly. "There's your answer. They're probably burying the real documents in stacks of legitimate paperwork. You sign 20 pages. 18 are routine. 2 are property transfers. Most people don't read every line of every page, especially not from family." The betrayal felt fresh again, sharp in my chest. "What else do you need?" I asked. "Bank records, corporate filings. I want to see every piece of paper related to this Serrano Family Trust LLC, when it was formed, who the members are, where the money's going. I've requested bank statements. They'll be mailed to my home. Not good enough. They might intercept them. Do you have online banking?" "No." "Can you set it up?" "I don't use computers much." Hammond smiled. "That's okay. My daughter can walk you through it. She's 22 and very patient. Can you come to my office Monday morning?" "I'll be there." "One more thing, Mrs. Serrano. Be careful what you say to your family this weekend. If they suspect you know something, They'll accelerate whatever they're planning. I drove home in a fog, my mind racing through implications and possibilities. The house felt different when I unlocked the door, less like a sanctuary, more like a stage where I'd been performing without knowing it. The mail had arrived. Between the catalogs and charity requests, I found a thick envelope from Richard Townsend's law office. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside were 3 documents. The first was a letter on law firm letterhead. Dear Evelyn, pursuant to our phone conversation last week, enclosed, please find the updated estate planning documents we discussed. Please review and sign where indicated, then return in the enclosed envelope at your earliest convenience. As always, please don't hesitate to call with questions. I'd had no phone conversation with Richard last week. I'd barely spoken to him since Robert's funeral last September. The second document was a revision to my living trust, adding Liam and Wilma as co-trustees in the event of incapacity or cognitive decline. The third was a durable power of attorney, granting Liam immediate authority over all financial and legal matters. Both required my signature. I set them on the kitchen table and stared at them for a long time. They were accelerating. Hammond had warned me to be careful, but they were already moving forward, probably assuming I'd sign these like I'd supposedly signed the others. My phone rang again. Liam this time. Hey, Mom! Did you get Richard's envelope? My throat was dry. Just arrived. Great. I know legal stuff is boring, but Richard says it's important to have everything updated. I can swing by tomorrow and help you go through it if you want. That's thoughtful, honey, but I can manage. You sure? Some of the language is pretty technical. I'm sure. A pause. Mom, are you okay? You sound strange. Just tired. I didn't sleep well. All right. Well, don't forget about Sunday dinner. Wilma really wants to talk to you. I remember. 5 o'clock. After he hung up, I called Richard Townsend's office. I'm sorry, Mrs. Serrano, his secretary said. Richard's in court all day. Can I take a message? Tell him I received his documents. I have some questions before I sign anything. I'd like to meet Monday morning if possible. Let me check his calendar. A pause. He has an opening at 10. Perfect. Should I let Liam know you're coming? He's usually copied on your matters. No, I said quickly. I'll handle it directly with Richard. Another pause, this one uncomfortable. Of course, Mrs. Serrano. I hung up and immediately regretted the call. Now Richard would tell Liam that I'd called, that I had questions, that I wanted a meeting. They'd know I was suspicious. But maybe that was inevitable. Maybe the moment I'd heard them through that conference room door, the collision course was set. I spent the afternoon going through my home office, a small room off the kitchen that Robert had built for me 30 years ago. Filing cabinets lined one wall, stuffed with decades of records. I found the folder labeled Legal Documents, Trust and Estate. Inside was my original living trust from 2019, after Robert died. My will. Healthcare directives. Everything was in order, exactly as I remembered. No power of attorney, no grants of authority to Liam or anyone else. I was photographing each document with my phone. Hammond had suggested this, when I heard a car in the driveway. I shoved the papers back into the folder and walked to the window. Avery's Mercedes. My heart rate spiked. She shouldn't be here. She was supposed to be in Turks and Caicos until Monday. The doorbell rang. I took a breath, smoothed my hair, and opened the door with a smile. Avery, I thought you were still on vacation. She looked perfect, as always. Cream silk blouse, tailored pants, subtle makeup. Her smile didn't waver. I came back early. Missed the grandkids. Is this a bad time? Not at all. Come in. She swept into the living room, her eyes scanning everything with an efficiency I'd never noticed before. Coffee? I offered. That would be lovely. In the kitchen, I started the pot and tried to quiet my racing thoughts. Why was she here? What did she want? Evelyn, she called from the living room. I wanted to talk to you about Sunday dinner. I carried 2 mugs into the room. What about it? She accepted her coffee but didn't drink. Liam told me about the family meeting. I think it's wonderful that you're all getting together to discuss your plans. My plans? For your retirement. For making sure everything's organized. It must be exhausting. Trying to keep track of everything. I sipped my coffee. I manage. Of course you do. But Wilma and Liam worry. We all worry. You've been so strong since Robert passed, but... She trailed off, her expression sympathetic. It's okay to need help, Evelyn. It's okay to let the younger generation take over some of the burden. I don't feel burdened. That's because you're remarkable. But legally, there are protections you should have in place. Richard's documents are just common sense. Every woman your age should have updated powers of attorney, updated trusts. It's responsible planning. She was good, I realized. Very good. The concerns seemed genuine, the logic sound. If I hadn't heard her in that conference room, I would have believed every word. I'll review everything carefully, I said. Of course. But don't overthink it. Richard's been your attorney for 20 years. Liam would never suggest anything that wasn't in your best interest. She set down her untouched coffee and stood. I should go. But Evelyn, we're family. We love you. Everything we're doing is to protect you. After she left, I locked the door and returned to the living room. Her coffee mug sat on the side table. Beside it, laid out neatly, were the 3 documents from Richard's office. I'd left them on the kitchen table. She'd been in my house less than 10 minutes, but she'd had time to find those documents, look through them, and leave them displayed where I couldn't miss them. The message was clear. We're watching. We know what you have, where you have it, and we're always one step ahead. I picked up my phone and texted Hammond. Need to move the documents somewhere safe. They have access to my house. His response came immediately. Safe deposit box. Different bank than you normally use. Tomorrow morning. I'll meet you there. I gathered every important paper in the house and put them in a canvas bag. Then I sat in Robert's old chair and waited for my hands to stop shaking. Sunday's family meeting was in 36 hours. I needed to be ready. Saturday morning, I met Tom Hammond at First Republic Bank, a small institution across town where I'd never done business. The safe deposit box cost $45 to rent, and I paid in cash. Don't tell anyone about this, Hammond said as we loaded the documents into the metal drawer. Not your children, not your friends. This is your insurance policy. What if something happens to me? He handed me a business card with a handwritten note on the back. My attorney's information. I've already briefed him. If anything happens, anything unusual, he has instructions to contact the authorities and retrieve these documents. The weight of that statement settled over me. We were talking about my children, about the possibility that they might, what? Hurt me, have me declared incompetent and locked away. A month ago, the thought would have been absurd. There's something else, Hammond said. I did some preliminary research on Serrano Family Trust, LLC. Want to guess who the registered members are? Liam and Avery? Liam, Avery, and Wilma. My daughter. I'd been holding on to hope that Wilma was simply misguided, manipulated by Avery's insinuations. But if she was a member of the trust entity that was stripping assets from my company... When was it formed? I asked quietly. January 2024, almost a year ago. 10 months. They'd been planning this for 10 months, slowly moving pieces into place while I smiled and served pot roast at Sunday dinners. There's more, Hammond said. The LLC shows payments to Portland Development Group, $500,000 transferred in September. PDG is owned by someone named Ralph Brown. Know him? I shook my head. He's a commercial developer. Specializes in converting agricultural land to residential subdivisions. 3 months ago, he applied for a zoning variance on your Portland property. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. They're selling the land for development. Not selling, they've already sold it. The deal closed October 15th. Sale price, $42 million. The safe deposit room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the table. Mrs. Serrano, are you all right? $42 million? The contract shows a complex payout structure. $10 million up front, the rest over 3 years as the development progresses. But here's the interesting part. The funds didn't go to Serrano Agricultural Holdings. They went directly to the LLC. That's theft. It's complicated. If you signed documents authorizing the transfer of the property to the LLC, and the LLC then sold it, technically it might be legal. Unethical? Yes. but prosecuting it would be difficult, especially if your children claim you approved everything and simply forgot. I closed my eyes. What do I do? We need evidence that you didn't approve the transfers. I'm working on getting a forensic document examiner to analyze the signatures, but that takes time, possibly weeks. For now, you need to play along. Tomorrow's dinner. Go to it. Act normal. Don't let them know you suspect anything. If they think you're confused or declining, they'll push harder. But if you seem competent and aware, it might slow them down. I left the bank feeling like I was preparing for battle, which I supposed I was. At home, I spent the afternoon cooking. Pot roast, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans, Robert's mother's dinner roll recipe. Cooking had always been my meditation, my way of thinking through problems while my hands stayed busy. By 4:30 Sunday afternoon, the house smelled like comfort and normalcy. By 4:45, I'd set the dining room table with the good china. By 5 o'clock, when I heard cars in the driveway, I'd transformed myself into exactly what they expected. A sweet, elderly mother, happy to have her family together. Liam arrived first, alone. Avery was with the grandchildren, he explained. Wilma came moments later with her husband Paul, a quiet man who worked in insurance and rarely spoke at family gatherings. We made small talk while I finished the meal. Wilma complimented my hair. Liam mentioned the weather. Paul asked about my garden. Everything was aggressively pleasant. Over dinner, they continued the performance. Compliments on the food, questions about my week. Wilma told a funny story about her youngest daughter's soccer game. Finally, over coffee, Liam cleared his throat. Mom, there's something we need to discuss. I looked up, playing my role. That sounds serious. Wilma reached across the table and took my hand. We love you, Mom. Everything we're about to say comes from a place of love. My heart was pounding, but I kept my expression open, curious. We're worried about you, Liam continued. Living here alone in this big house, managing the business, keeping track of finances. It's a lot for anyone, especially someone my age? I offered gently. Especially after losing Dad, Wilma corrected. Grief affects people in different ways. Sometimes it causes confusion, forgetfulness. It's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm not confused, I said. Mom, you wrote a check for the wrong amount last month. You told me yourself you couldn't remember where you'd put your car keys. It took you 20 minutes to find them. Everyone misplaces keys. And last week, Liam said, when I brought you those papers to sign, you signed them without reading them. You told me you trusted me to handle the details. The trap was beautiful in its construction. Every normal moment, every casual comment, had been catalogued and weaponized. I do trust you, I said carefully. You're my son. That's exactly why we need to have this conversation, Wilma said. Because we can't stand by and watch you struggle. We've consulted with Richard Townsend, who suggested some legal protections. Liam finished. Updates to your trust, power of attorney arrangements, simple steps that ensure everything's properly managed. I received those documents, I said. I have questions about them. A look passed between my children, too quick to fully read. What kind of questions? Liam asked. The power of attorney seems very broad. It would give you control over everything. My assets, my medical decisions, where I live. That's standard, Wilma said. Paul and I have the same arrangement with his parents. It just means that if something happens, we can act quickly on your behalf. If something happens, or when you decide something should happen. Silence fell over the table. Paul studied his coffee cup. Wilma's hand tightened on mine. Mom, Liam said slowly. That's exactly the kind of paranoid thinking that concerns us. Is it paranoid to want to understand legal documents before signing them? It's paranoid to think your own children are conspiring against you. His voice had an edge now, frustration breaking through the careful facade. I never said that. You're implying it. What do you think we're doing, Mom? Trying to steal from you? We're trying to protect you, from yourself, if necessary. The mask was slipping. I could see the calculation behind his eyes. How hard to push. How much pressure to apply. I'd like to speak with Richard before signing anything, I said calmly. That seems reasonable. Of course. Wilma said quickly, shooting Liam a warning look. Of course you should talk to Richard. But Mom, you need to understand. This isn't just about paperwork. We're concerned about your safety. This house is too big. What if you fell? What if there was an emergency and no one was here? I have my phone. I can call for help. Last Tuesday, your phone was dead all afternoon. I tried calling you 6 times. That was true. I'd forgotten to charge it overnight. We think, Liam said, that it might be time to consider other living arrangements. Somewhere with support, community, people checking in regularly. There it was. Not a conservatorship, at least not yet. Just a gentle suggestion that I should move somewhere they could control my access to information, monitor my communications, and complete the asset transfer without interference. I'm not moving, I said quietly. Mom, this is my home. Robert and I built our life here. I'm not leaving. We're not asking you to decide tonight, Wilma said. But please, at least think about it. And please sign the documents from Richard, for our peace of mind. I looked at my daughter, at the concern on her face that seemed so genuine. Wilma, honey, let me ask you something. Do you believe I'm incompetent? Of course not. Do you think I don't understand my own finances? My own business? I think you're grieving and overwhelmed. I think Dad's death hit you harder than you admit. I think you're lonely and sad, and you're not thinking as clearly as you used to. And what would you do if I were thinking clearly? If I told you I understand exactly what's happening and I refuse to sign anything? Another look between my children, longer this time. Some silent communication I couldn't decipher. Then we'd have to consider other options, Liam said finally, for your protection, such as a formal competency evaluation. If a doctor determines you're no longer capable of managing your affairs, you'd have me declared incompetent. We'd have you properly evaluated, Wilma corrected. Mom, why are you being so resistant? If you have nothing to hide, if you're as competent as you claim, an evaluation would prove it. The logic was flawless. Refuse the evaluation, and I looked guilty and unstable. Submit to it, and they'd find a doctor willing to diagnose declining capacity. They'd probably already found one. I stood up. I think you should leave now. Mom, I said leave. I'll call Richard tomorrow. I'll think about everything you've said. But right now, I need you to go. Liam stood too, his face flushed. This is a mistake. You're making a huge mistake. It's my mistake to make. Paul finally spoke, his voice gentle. Evelyn, they really do love you. They're worried. I know, I said, and I meant it. They probably did love me in their way. They just loved $42 million more. After they left, I sat at the dining table surrounded by the debris of dinner and let myself shake. The confrontation had been inevitable, but the reality was worse than I'd imagined. They weren't going to back down. They were going to escalate. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Serrano, this is Tom Hammond. Don't respond to this message. Use the burner phone I left in your mailbox. We need to talk tonight. Someone filed a petition for emergency conservatorship this afternoon. The hearing is Tuesday. I read the message 3 times, my blood turning to ice. Tuesday. Tomorrow was Monday. They were moving in 48 hours. I walked to the mailbox in the dark, my legs shaking. Inside was a cheap flip phone and a note in Hammond's handwriting. Call me from this. Your regular phone may be monitored. Back inside, I dialed the number he'd texted from. Mrs. Serrano. How did they file on a Sunday? Emergency petitions can be filed electronically. Richard Townsend submitted it at 3 p.m., 2 hours before your dinner. They were planning this before they even talked to you. What does it say? That you're suffering from cognitive decline and dementia, that you've made concerning financial decisions, that you're at risk of self-harm or exploitation. They're asking for temporary conservatorship pending a full evaluation. Who signed it? Liam and Wilma, both. They presented a united front. And they have documentation. The checkbook error, reportedly forgetting appointments. The unsigned legal documents you allegedly agreed to but never returned. I sank into a chair. What do I do? Tuesday's hearing is procedural. You probably won't even be notified until after the fact. They'll claim you're too impaired to participate. Once the temporary order is granted, they'll have control of your assets within hours. Can we stop it? Maybe. If you appear at the hearing with your own attorney, demonstrating full competency, the judge might deny the petition. But, Mrs. Serrano, you need to understand. They have Richard Townsend, a respected attorney who's known you for 20 years, saying this is necessary. You'll be fighting uphill. Then I'll fight uphill. There's something else. I found records of transfers I didn't tell you about earlier. The grain facility, the equipment, even the downtown office building. Everything's been moved into the LLC. As of Friday, Serrano Agricultural Holdings is basically an empty shell. All the assets are gone. How is that possible? You signed the documents, Mrs. Serrano, or someone with access to your signature stamp did. I found records of purchase orders for office supplies from 3 months ago, including a self-inking signature stamp, ordered on company accounts, delivered to the office. A signature stamp. They didn't even need to forge my signature. They could stamp it on anything. The Portland sale, Hammond continued, was just the beginning. They've been systematically stripping the company for months. The only thing left in the original business is debt, about $3 million in equipment loans and operational credit lines. My guess is they'll let the company go bankrupt, stick you with the debt, and walk away with the assets. I couldn't breathe. 40 years of work. Robert's legacy. Everything we'd built. There has to be something we can do, I whispered. There is. But it requires you to be strategic and cold-blooded. Can you do that? Tell me. We have until Tuesday morning. Between now and then, we're going to build a case that you're not only competent, but that you've been the victim of fraud. I've already contacted a forensic accountant and a handwriting expert. Tomorrow morning, you're going to see a neurologist for a full cognitive evaluation. I have one on standby who's willing to do emergency testing. And then we're going to walk into that courtroom and destroy their case. But Mrs. Serrano, you need to understand, this will burn every bridge with your family. There's no going back from this. I looked around the dining room, at the empty chairs where my children had sat, at the dishes they'd eaten from, at the home that was about to become a battlefield. Then we burn the bridges, I said. Monday morning arrived with cold rain and the wait of 36 hours that would determine the rest of my life. Dr. Ellen Mann's office was in a medical building 40 minutes outside Millbrook. Hammond had insisted on the distance. The farther from my regular doctors, the less chance of interference. Your children might try to influence any local physicians, he'd explained during our late-night phone call. Dr. Mann has no connection to your family or their attorneys. The neurologist was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner that reminded me of my late mother-in-law. Mr. Hammond explained the situation, she said, shaking my hand. I want to be clear. I'm not here to give you a passing grade because someone's paying me. I'm going to conduct a thorough evaluation. If I find cognitive impairment, I'll document it honestly. I understand. Good. Let's begin. The next 3 hours were exhausting. Memory tests, pattern recognition, problem-solving exercises, verbal fluency assessments. She asked me to recall lists of words, draw clock faces, explain proverbs, count backward from 100 by sevens. How long have you lived at your current address? She asked. 43 years, since 1982. Can you describe the route from your home to the nearest grocery store? I walked her through every turn, every landmark. What medications do you take? Atorvastatin for cholesterol, 20 milligrams daily. Low-dose aspirin. Vitamin D supplement. That's all. Any history of memory problems? Confusion? Getting lost? No. Any falls? Dizziness? Difficulty with daily tasks? No. She made notes, her expression unreadable. Finally, she set down her pen. Mrs. Serrano, I can tell you right now that you're cognitively intact. Your memory is excellent. Your executive function is normal, and you show no signs of dementia or significant impairment. I'll have a full report by this evening. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. However, she continued, you should know that cognitive evaluation is subjective to some degree. If your children have found a physician willing to testify that you're impaired, the judge will have conflicting expert opinions. It becomes a credibility contest. But I'm not impaired. I know that. You know that. But in court, anything can happen. I left her office with a signed letter confirming my competency, but the relief was already fading into anxiety. One piece of evidence secured. But how many would we need? Hammond was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his car despite the rain. How'd it go? She says I'm fine. She'll have a full report tonight. Good. Next stop, the accountant. Maurice Rendell's office was in a converted Victorian house near the university. He greeted us in a cluttered room lined with filing cabinets and outdated computer equipment. I've been going through the records Hammond provided, he said, gesturing to a desk covered in spreadsheets. Mrs. Serrano, your family has been systematically looting your company for at least 10 months, possibly longer. He spread out a series of documents, color-coded and annotated. Here's the timeline. January 2024, Serrano Family Trust LLC is formed. February, first property transfer. A small parcel worth about $200,000. That was probably a test. When you didn't notice, they got bolder. I never saw those documents, I said, because they were probably buried in routine paperwork. Look at this. He showed me a stack of operational reports from March. 23 pages of vendor contracts, lease renewals, and maintenance schedules. Page 15 is a property transfer authorization. Same font, same formatting. If you were signing quickly, you'd never catch it. How much have they taken total? Rendell consulted his notes. Asset transfers to the LLC total approximately $67 million. That includes the Portland sale proceeds, the grain facility, equipment, and the downtown building. The original company now holds assets worth maybe $5 million, mostly aging equipment and inventory, against debt of $3.2 million. I felt sick. Can we prove I didn't authorize the transfers? That's complicated. You did sign some documents. We have your signature on various forms throughout the year. The question is whether you understood what you were signing. I didn't. Which they'll claim proves incompetence, not fraud. Rendell looked at me sympathetically. The legal system tends to assume that adults read what they sign. If you didn't, you're either negligent or impaired. So they win? Not necessarily. Hammond found something interesting in the LLC's banking records. Rendell pulled up a spreadsheet on his computer. Large cash withdrawals. 5 separate transactions over 6 months, each for just under $10,000. The reporting threshold. Total, $48,000. What's that for? Hammond answered. We don't know yet, but it's suspicious. Why would a holding company need that much cash? I'm betting they paid someone. Maybe the doctor who'll testify about your incompetence. Maybe someone to forge documents. If we can trace where that money went, we might have leverage. How long will that take? Longer than we have. But Mrs. Serrano, you need to make a decision. Tomorrow morning's hearing is procedural. If we show up and fight, we're declaring war. Your children will know you're onto them. They'll accelerate everything, possibly file criminal charges against you for interfering with legal proceedings. Criminal charges against me? If they convince a judge you're mentally impaired and you're fighting conservatorship, they could argue you're a danger to yourself or others. They could get an involuntary psychiatric hold. The walls were closing in again. Every option led to worse options. What if I don't fight tomorrow? I asked quietly. What if I let the temporary conservatorship go through? Then they control everything. Your bank accounts, your property, your medical care. You'd have to petition to get your rights back, which could take months and cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees. And they'd be using your money to fight you. I stood and walked to the window. Rain streaked the glass, distorting the street beyond. 43 years, I said. Robert and I worked for 43 years to build something we could pass to our children. We wanted them secure, comfortable. We never imagined that they'd betray you, Hammond finished gently, that I'd have to choose between fighting them and losing everything. My phone buzzed. My regular phone, not the burner. A text from Liam. Mom, I'm sorry about last night. Can we talk? I'm worried about you. Please call me. I showed it to Hammond. Don't respond, he said immediately. Anything you say can be used against you. He's my son. He's also the person trying to steal your life's work and lock you away. I stared at the message. Despite everything, part of me wanted to believe Liam was conflicted, that he'd been manipulated by Avery, that there was still something salvageable between us. Another text arrived. Avery thinks we were too harsh. She wants to help. She's a corporate attorney. She knows business law. Let her review the trust documents with you. She can explain everything in plain English. Corporate attorney? I looked at Hammond. Avery never mentioned practicing law. He was already typing on his phone. 30 seconds later, he had an answer. Avery Serrano, graduated from Northwestern Law in 2012, worked at Foster & Klein for 2 years, then moved to Portland, specialized in corporate restructuring and asset protection, fell into place with stunning clarity. She planned this, I breathed. From the beginning, this is what she does. Restructure companies, protect assets. She's been planning to take my company since she married Liam. 8 years, Rendell said, checking his notes. They've been married 8 years. That's a long game. She waited until Robert died. I continued, the realization bitter in my mouth. While he was alive, she couldn't touch anything. But once he was gone, once I was alone and grieving, I looked at Hammond. The checkbook mistake Wilma mentioned. When was that? He consulted his notes. October 3rd, 3 weeks after Robert's funeral. They'd been circling like vultures, waiting for moments of weakness, documenting every stumble, every forgotten detail, every sign that grief had made me vulnerable. There's more, Hammond said grimly. I got the property records for your house. 2 weeks ago, someone filed a quiet title action. What does that mean? It means they're trying to claim ownership of your home based on alleged unpaid debts or liens. If it goes through, they could force a sale. My house is paid off. We paid it off in 1999. I know. But there's a lien recorded against it, dated 2023, claiming you borrowed $400,000 from Serrano Agricultural Holdings and secured the debt with your home. I never borrowed money from my own company. I believe you. But the document exists. It has your signature, or a stamped version of it. If the quiet title action succeeds, they could foreclose. I sat down heavily. They're taking everything. The company, the assets, even my home. Not if we stop them tomorrow. How? You said the hearing is procedural. You said anything I do could be used against me. Rendell spoke up. There is one option. A nuclear option. But it might work. Hammond shot him a warning look. Rendell, she deserves to know all her choices. Rendell turned to me. Mrs. Serrano, you could file a criminal complaint. Report the fraud to the police and the FBI. Financial exploitation of an elderly person is a federal crime. Against my own children? Against anyone who commits it. If you file a complaint, it creates a public record. The conservatorship hearing becomes more complicated because there's an active criminal investigation. Judges don't like granting control to people who are under investigation. But it also, Hammond interjected, paints a target on your back. They'll argue you're paranoid, delusional, making false accusations. It could backfire spectacularly. What would I need to file a complaint? Evidence, which we have. The forged signatures, the asset transfers, the signature stamp. I've already compiled a preliminary report. Rendell slid a folder across the desk. Everything's documented here. But Mrs. Serrano, once you file this, there's no taking it back. You'll be accusing your son and daughter of felony fraud. I opened the folder. Page after page of evidence, meticulously organized. Transfer documents, banking records, timelines. The story of my betrayal, laid out in cold numbers and legal language. My phone rang. Wilma, this time. I let it go to voicemail, but she called again immediately. Then again. She's persistent, Hammond observed. On the 4th call, I answered. Hello, Wilma. Mom, thank goodness. We've been trying to reach you all morning. Where are you? Running errands. Why? You missed your appointment with Dr. Peterson. I had no appointment with Dr. Peterson, my regular physician. I did? Yes, the appointment we made for you last week to discuss your memory issues. His office called Liam when you didn't show up. Mom, this is exactly the kind of thing that worries us. I don't remember making an appointment. Even as I said it, I heard how it sounded. But I genuinely had no memory of scheduling anything with Dr. Peterson. That's the problem, Mom. You don't remember. Dr. Peterson wants to see you as soon as possible. Can Liam pick you up and take you? I'm fine, Wilma. I don't need... Please, Mom. For me. If you're really okay, the evaluation will prove it. But if something's wrong, we need to know. Hammond was shaking his head vigorously, mouthing, no. I'll call Dr. Peterson myself, I said. Schedule something for next week. Next week might be too late. What if something happens? What if you fall or forget to take your medication or... Wilma, I have to go. I'll call you later. I hung up before she could respond. They're accelerating, Hammond said. They know something's wrong. Maybe they talked to Richard. Maybe they're just paranoid. But they're pushing hard. The appointment with Dr. Peterson. Did they really schedule one? I'll call his office and find out. But Mrs. Serrano, even if they did, don't go. Any evaluation you do now needs to be on your terms, with your own doctors. Rendell closed his laptop. You need to decide. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., that hearing happens. You can either appear with an attorney and fight, or you can let it proceed and lose everything. There's no middle ground. If I fight, what are my chances? Honestly, maybe 50-50. We have evidence you're competent. We have questions about the asset transfers. But they have a respected attorney, 2 concerned children, and a narrative that's very believable. Elderly widow, grieving and confused, making poor decisions. And if I file a criminal complaint? Odds improve to maybe 60-40, but the personal cost is higher. You'll be at war with your entire family. I looked at the folder on the desk, at the evidence of betrayal compiled in neat rows of numbers. I need to think, I said finally. Can I keep this? It's your copy. Outside, the rain had intensified. Hammond walked me to my car under a shared umbrella. Mrs. Serrano, whatever you decide soon. We need to file paperwork by 8 p.m. tonight if we're going to fight tomorrow. I understand. And Mrs. Serrano? For what it's worth, I think you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. Most people in your situation would have already given up. I drove home through the rain, the folder on my passenger seat like a bomb waiting to detonate. At a stoplight, I noticed a car behind me. A black SUV, tinted windows. It had been behind me since I'd left the accountant's office. I turned left instead of right. The SUV turned left. I circled the block. The SUV followed. My hands tightened on the wheel. They were watching me. Of course they were watching me. I pulled into a busy shopping center and parked near the entrance, where cameras and crowds would provide witnesses. The SUV drove past slowly, then continued out of the lot. I couldn't go home. Not yet. Not until I'd decided what to do. I sat in that parking lot for 2 hours, reading Rendell's report, weighing my options, and trying to find a path forward that didn't destroy what was left of my family. By the time I started the car again, I'd made my decision. It was time to stop running and start fighting back. At 7:45 Monday evening, I called Hammond from the burner phone. I'm ready to fight. File everything. There was a pause. You're sure? I'm sure. What do I need to do? Be at the courthouse tomorrow at 8:30. Wear something professional but not intimidating. You want to look competent, not aggressive. I've arranged for attorney Jennifer Cole to represent you. She specializes in elder law and conservatorship cases. What about the criminal complaint? We'll hold that in reserve. If the hearing goes badly, we file it immediately after. It's better leverage as a threat than as an actual action right now. After we hung up, I went through my closet and selected a navy dress and pearl earrings. Then I sat at my kitchen table and wrote 3 letters, 1 to Liam, 1 to Wilma, and 1 to my grandchildren. I sealed them in envelopes and put them in the safe deposit box folder just in case. If tomorrow went wrong, I wanted them to know the truth. I barely slept. By 6 a.m., I was dressed and drinking coffee, watching the sunrise through my kitchen window. This house, these walls, Robert and I had painted them ourselves in 1982, working through weekends while Liam toddled around with a plastic hammer, helping. The memory hurt more than I'd expected. At 8:15, I arrived at the courthouse. Jennifer Cole was waiting on the steps, A woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every trick in the book. "Mrs. Serrano, I've reviewed your case file. This is going to be challenging, but we have good arguments." She handed me a folder. "Here's what we're presenting. Your cognitive evaluation, the financial expert's report showing suspicious transfers, and testimony about your active management of daily affairs. The goal is to show you're competent and that the petition is premature at best, fraudulent at worst. Will my children be here? Almost certainly. Their attorney will present their case. Be prepared for difficult testimony." We entered the courthouse through security. The conservatorship hearing was in a small courtroom on the 3rd floor. Not the grand chambers I'd imagined, but a functional space with worn carpet and fluorescent lighting. Liam and Wilma were already seated with Richard Townsend. Avery sat behind them, immaculate in a gray suit. They all turned when I entered. The shock on Liam's face was genuine. He hadn't expected me to appear, to fight back. Wilma's expression was harder to read, surprise mixed with something that might have been guilt. "All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding." The judge was a black woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes that swept the courtroom efficiently. She sat, reviewed the papers before her, and looked up. "This is a petition for emergency temporary conservatorship, filed by Liam Serrano and Wilma Serrano Sanders, regarding their mother, Evelyn Serrano." "I see, Mrs. Serrano is present and represented. Mr. Townsend, you weren't expecting this?" Richard stood. "Your Honor, we were not. Mrs. Serrano was informed of these proceedings, but given her documented cognitive issues, we didn't anticipate her ability to mount a legal response. Yet, here she is, apparently quite capable." Judge Morrison looked at me over her reading glasses. "Mrs. Serrano, do you understand why you're here today?" I stood. "Yes, Your Honor. My children believe I'm incompetent to manage my own affairs. They're seeking to take control of my assets and decisions." "And you dispute this?" "Strongly, Your Honor." "Very well. Mr. Townsend, present your case." Richard approached the bench with practiced confidence. "Your Honor, this is a heartbreaking situation. Evelyn Serrano is a remarkable woman who built a successful agricultural business with her late husband. However, since his death 18 months ago, her children have observed concerning deterioration in her cognitive abilities and judgment." He presented a timeline. The checkbook error, reportedly missed appointments, confusion about business matters, increasing forgetfulness. He had affidavits from Dr. Peterson describing my declining presentation at recent visits, from neighbors who'd seen me wandering confused in my garden, from business associates who'd noted my inability to follow complex discussions. Each piece was a small truth twisted into something sinister. The checkbook error became evidence of mathematical confusion. Working in my garden became aimless wandering. My decision to let Liam handle daily business operations became inability to understand them. "Most concerning," Richard continued, "are Mrs. Serrano's recent paranoid accusations. She's begun claiming that her own children are conspiring against her, that business documents have been forged, that she's being monitored. These are classic signs of dementia-related paranoia." "I see." Judge Morrison made notes. "Do you have expert medical testimony?" "Dr. Peterson has provided a written statement. He's available by video conference if needed." "That won't be necessary yet." "Ms. Cole, your response?" Jennifer stood and immediately went on the offensive. "Your Honor, this petition is not about protecting a vulnerable adult. It's about 2 adult children seizing control of substantial assets from a competent mother who discovered their fraud." Richard shot to his feet. "Objection. That's a serious accusation." "That I can support with evidence," Jennifer interrupted smoothly. She approached the bench with her own folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to present Dr. Ellen Mann's comprehensive cognitive evaluation, conducted yesterday. Dr. Mann is a board-certified neurologist with no prior connection to this family. Her findings are unequivocal. Mrs. Serrano demonstrates no cognitive impairment whatsoever." She distributed copies to the judge and Richard. I watched his face as he read, saw the flicker of concern. "Additionally," Jennifer continued, "we have a forensic accounting report prepared by Maurice Rendell, CPA. Mr. Rendell analyzed Serrano Agricultural Holdings' financial records and discovered approximately $67 million in assets transferred to a family trust LLC, of which the petitioners are members, over the past 10 months. These transfers were allegedly authorized by Mrs. Serrano, yet she has no memory of approving them. Because of her impaired memory, Richard countered, or because the authorizations were forged using a signature stamp purchased on company accounts. Jennifer produced the purchase order. This stamp was ordered in February 2024, 3 months before the first major asset transfer. Mrs. Serrano never ordered it and was unaware of its existence until yesterday. Judge Morrison's expression had shifted from routine boredom to sharp interest. Mr. Townsend, were you aware of these financial transfers? I handled the legal paperwork, yes, at Mrs. Serrano's request and with her full knowledge. The transfers were part of estate planning and asset protection. Without her knowledge, Jennifer interjected. Your Honor, may I call Mrs. Serrano to testify? Proceed. I took the witness stand, my hands steady despite my racing heart. Jennifer walked me through my background, my education, my 40 years running the business with Robert, my continued involvement after his death. Mrs. Serrano, did you authorize the transfer of the Portland property to Serrano Family Trust LLC? No, I did not. Did you authorize the sale of that property to Portland Development Group for $42 million? Absolutely not. I had no knowledge of that sale until 3 days ago. Did you know your children had formed an LLC in January 2024? No. Did you ever grant your son Liam power of attorney over your affairs? Never. Mrs. Serrano, why do you believe your children filed this petition? I looked directly at Liam and Wilma. Because I discovered what they've been doing. They need to complete the asset transfer before I can stop them, and the only way to do that is to have me declared incompetent. Richard stood for cross-examination, his expression professionally sympathetic. Mrs. Serrano, I've been your attorney for 20 years. You trust me, don't you? I did trust you. When I brought you documents to sign over the years, you signed them without question, correct? I signed documents I understood, yes. But you didn't always read every page carefully, did you? You trusted that I was acting in your best interest. I trusted everyone in this room. That was my mistake. Or perhaps you simply don't remember signing the authorizations. Isn't it possible that grief has affected your memory more than you realize? I remember everything important, Mr. Townsend, including the conversation I overheard last Thursday. His eyes narrowed. What conversation? Between my son and daughter-in-law, in the conference room at my company's office. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I was going to visit my son at work when I saw my daughter-in-law's car in the parking lot. She was supposedly on vacation. I stopped outside the conference room and heard them discussing their plans. The asset consolidation, the December 15th deadline, the conservatorship petition they planned to file. Avery's face had gone pale. Liam was staring at his hands. You heard them discuss filing for conservatorship? Jennifer prompted. I heard Avery tell Liam that with both children in agreement, the court would grant temporary conservatorship within 6 weeks. I heard her mention Richard by name, saying he was holding the documents at his office. That was 10 days before this petition was actually filed. Judge Morrison looked at Richard. Mr. Townsend? Your Honor, even if this alleged conversation occurred, which I have no knowledge of, it doesn't change the underlying concern about Mrs. Serrano's capacity. The fact that she's interpreting normal family business discussions as conspiracy suggests exactly the kind of paranoid thinking we're concerned about. Normal family business? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. They sold property I owned for $42 million and kept the money. They transferred everything my husband and I built into an entity I knew nothing about. They forged my signature on dozens of documents. That's not business. It's theft. Alleged theft, Richard corrected. And Mrs. Serrano, if you truly believed crimes were being committed, why didn't you report this to the police? I reached into my purse and pulled out a document. I did. This morning, I filed a formal complaint with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit at 6 a.m. before this hearing. The courtroom went silent. Jennifer smiled. Your Honor, I was going to hold this in reserve, but Mrs. Serrano took the initiative. The FBI has opened an investigation into potential financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. I'm not vulnerable, I corrected quietly. But my children assumed I was. That was their mistake. Richard was shuffling papers frantically. Your Honor, this is clearly a retaliatory action. Is it retaliation? Judge Morrison interrupted. Or is it a legitimate criminal complaint? Because if even 10% of what's been presented today is accurate, there are serious questions about the motives behind this conservatorship petition. She looked at Liam and Wilma. Would either petitioner like to testify? Wilma half rose, but Avery put a hand on her arm. Liam shook his head. Very well. Judge Morrison reviewed her notes for a long moment. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. Finally, she looked up. This court finds insufficient evidence to grant emergency conservatorship. Mrs. Serrano has demonstrated clear competency in her testimony today. Dr. Mann's evaluation supports this. While Mr. Townsend has presented concerns about memory and judgment, these appear to be normal variations rather than incapacitating impairment. Relief flooded through me, but Judge Morrison wasn't finished. However, I am deeply troubled by the allegations of financial misconduct. Mr. Townsend, I'm ordering all parties to preserve any and all documents related to Serrano Agricultural Holdings and Serrano Family Trust, LLC. Mrs. Serrano, you're to be granted full access to all corporate records and bank statements. If the FBI investigation substantiates fraud, this court will consider sanctions. She looked at my children, her expression stern. This is a family matter that's become a legal nightmare. I strongly suggest you attempt mediation before this destroys what's left of your relationships. Petition denied. The gavel came down. I sat frozen, barely believing what had happened. We'd won. I'd won. Jennifer squeezed my shoulder. Let's go. Quickly. We left through a side door while Richard was still packing his briefcase. In the hallway, I finally let myself breathe. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait for the FBI investigation. In the meantime, you have full control of your affairs restored. They can't touch anything without your signature, and they know you're watching. Will they face charges? Possibly. Financial exploitation, fraud, forgery. It depends on what the investigation uncovers. But Mrs. Serrano, you need to prepare yourself. If charges are filed, your children could face prison time. I looked back at the courtroom doors. Prison. My children in prison. They made their choices, I said quietly. I'm just protecting what's mine. But as Jennifer walked me to my car, explaining next steps and legal protections, I couldn't shake the image of Liam's face when I'd testified. Not angry, but broken. The son who used to help me bake cookies and fell asleep reading on the couch. Reduced to a criminal defendant. Avery had destroyed him, I told myself. She'd planted the seeds, nurtured the greed, made him believe this was acceptable. But he'd watered those seeds himself. He'd made the choice to betray me. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and allowed myself 5 minutes to grieve the family I'd lost. Then I started the engine and drove toward home. There was still work to do. The company needed to be rebuilt. The assets needed to be recovered. And I needed to decide what came next. But for the first time in days, I felt like myself again. Not a confused old woman to be managed, but Evelyn Serrano, who'd built a business from dirt and determination. They'd underestimated me. That, more than anything, had been their fatal mistake. 3 weeks after the hearing, I sat in my kitchen reading the FBI's preliminary findings. Agent Carol Hendricks had delivered them personally that morning, her expression professional but sympathetic. Mrs. Serrano, we've confirmed systematic financial fraud. The signature stamp was used on 73 separate documents over 9 months. We've also traced the cash withdrawals, $48,000 paid to a document consultant who specializes in estate planning optimization, essentially someone who helps families quietly transfer assets. Will there be charges? The U.S. Attorney is reviewing the case. Given the amounts involved and the deliberate nature of the fraud, charges are likely. We're looking at wire fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation. She paused. I know these are your children, Mrs. Serrano. This can't be easy. It isn't, I said quietly. But neither was discovering they'd been stealing from me. After she left, I sat with the report for a long time. 73 forged documents. 9 months of systematic theft. The numbers were damning, clinical in their precision. My phone had been ringing constantly since the hearing. Journalists, business associates, concerned friends. I'd ignored most of them, but one call I couldn't avoid came that afternoon. Mom. Wilma's voice was small, younger than I'd heard it in years. Can we talk? Please? I don't think that's wise. Your attorney would probably advise against it. I fired my attorney. I fired Richard, too. A shaky breath. Mom, I need to see you. Just me. Not Liam. Not anyone else. Please. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Tomorrow. 2 o'clock. Here. She arrived exactly on time, driving a modest sedan I didn't recognize. The Mercedes was gone, apparently. She looked thinner, older, with dark circles under her eyes. We sat in the living room, the same room where we'd had 1,000 Sunday dinners, where she'd opened Christmas presents as a child, where Robert had taught her to play chess. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I know that's inadequate, but I need to say it. I'm so sorry, Mom. I waited. Avery told me you were declining. She showed me articles about early onset dementia, about how families need to act quickly to protect assets before the person becomes completely incompetent. She said you'd been making mistakes at the company, that Liam was covering for you to protect your dignity. And you believed her? I wanted to believe I was helping you. Wilma's voice cracked. That sounds insane now, but at the time, she was so convincing. She had documentation, expert opinions. She made it all seem so reasonable. And I was scared, Mom. Scared of losing you the way we lost Dad. So you decided to take control of my life before I could lose my mind? I thought I was protecting you from being exploited by someone else. By strangers who might take advantage. She laughed bitterly. I never saw that we were the exploiters. That Avery was using my fear to manipulate both of us. What about the money, Wilma? $67 million. Did you think that was just protection? She looked at her hands. Avery explained it as tax planning, asset protection, modernizing the corporate structure. She used so much legal jargon that I stopped questioning it. And honestly, her voice dropped. Part of me liked knowing my inheritance was secure. That we wouldn't have to worry about the company failing or you making poor decisions that would cost us everything. The honesty was brutal, but I appreciated it more than denials would have been. I didn't know about the Portland sale, Wilma continued. Not until after it happened. Avery said you'd approved it, that it was a good deal, that the development would benefit the community. When I found out how much money was involved, I started asking questions. But by then, Liam was in too deep. And you? I was a member of the LLC. I received distributions, almost $2 million over 6 months. I spent some of it, paid off my mortgage, bought a new car, set up college funds for my kids. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. I can't give it all back, Mom. I spent it. I'm going to prison, aren't I? I'd been waiting for this moment, rehearsing different responses. But seeing my daughter broken and terrified, I found my prepared speeches inadequate. I don't know, I said honestly. The FBI is building their case. The U.S. attorney will decide about charges. I deserve prison. What we did to you. She covered her face with her hands. You trusted us. You gave Liam control because you believed in him. And we repaid you by trying to steal everything and lock you away. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, I spoke. Wilma, I need you to testify. About everything. How Avery orchestrated this. How the transfers were arranged, where the money went. Full cooperation with the investigation. I've already told the FBI I would. My new attorney says it might reduce my sentence. It's not about reducing your sentence. It's about the truth. I leaned forward. And Wilma? I need you to understand something. I forgive you for being foolish and greedy. But I don't forgive you for thinking so little of me that you believed I couldn't manage my own life. Mom, let me finish. I'm 66 years old. I ran this company through recessions, droughts, and market crashes. I raised 2 children, buried a husband, and built something substantial from nothing. The fact that you could be convinced I was incompetent says more about your perception of aging than it does about my actual abilities. She nodded, tears falling steadily. If you want to rebuild our relationship, I continued, it starts with respecting me. Not as your elderly mother who needs protection, but as a competent adult who has earned the right to make her own decisions. I do respect you. I always have. No, you didn't. Respect would have meant talking to me directly about concerns. Respect would have meant questioning Avery's narrative. Respect would have meant trusting that if I needed help, I would ask for it. Wilma wiped her eyes. How do I fix this? I don't know if you can, but you can start by testifying honestly and accepting the consequences of your choices. After she left, I felt drained but oddly lighter. The conversation hadn't healed anything, but it had opened a door I'd thought was permanently closed. Liam was a different story. He didn't call, didn't visit. Instead, his new attorney, he'd fired Richard too, sent a formal letter. Liam denied knowing about the forged signatures. He claimed Avery had handled all the documentation, and he'd simply signed what she put in front of him. He was a victim too, the letter suggested. Manipulated by his wife. It was cowardice disguised as legal strategy. Hammond called a week later with news. Avery's gone. Cleaned out her and Liam's accounts and left the country. We think she's in the Cayman Islands, but she's smart enough to pick somewhere without an extradition treaty if she needs to move again. She's just gone? Left Liam holding the bag. Filed for divorce remotely. Claimed she had no knowledge of his fraudulent activities. It's actually brilliant. She gets away clean while he takes the fall. That's horrible. That's Avery. She planned this from the beginning, Mrs. Serrano. Every step was calculated. She married Liam, waited for your husband to die, executed the fraud, and prepared her exit strategy. The woman's a professional. I thought about my son, about the boy who'd wanted to be like his father, who'd worked alongside Robert learning the business. Somewhere in the past 8 years, Avery had hollowed him out and filled the space with greed and betrayal. What happens to Liam now? His attorney's negotiating a plea deal. If he cooperates fully and allocates the remaining assets back to you, he might avoid prison, house arrest, probation, restitution payments. But his career is over. His reputation is destroyed. 2 weeks later, I stood in the downtown office building for the first time since this began. The conference room where I'd overheard that fateful conversation looked smaller than I remembered. Maurice Randell had spent the past month untangling the financial mess. Some assets were recovered. The grain facility, the downtown building, most of the equipment. Others were gone, sold to third parties who'd bought them in good faith. The Portland property was the biggest loss. The development was already underway, bulldozers clearing the land that Robert had loved. Final accounting, Rendell said, spreading papers across the conference table. You've recovered about $48 million in assets and cash. $19 million is gone, spent, hidden, or lost to legitimate sales. It's not a complete recovery, but it's substantial. What about the company? Serrano Agricultural Holdings is yours again, free and clear. The debt's been restructured. You can rebuild if you want, or you can sell and retire. It's your choice. My choice. That phrase meant something different now. That evening, I drove out to the farm where Robert and I had started. The original 200 acres his grandfather had broken. The current owners, the Kowalski family, greeted me warmly. Mrs. Serrano, we heard about your legal troubles. We're so glad you prevailed. Thank you. I wanted to talk to you about your lease. They exchanged worried glances. We hope the new corporate structure won't affect our arrangement. There is no new corporate structure. And your lease isn't just renewed. I'm selling you the land. Fair market value, with financing at 2% interest over 20 years. Mrs. Kowalski's eyes widened. You're selling to us? This land should be farmed by people who love it. You've taken good care of it. It's time it was truly yours. We shook hands as the sun set over fields that had fed my family for 3 generations. It felt right, passing it forward rather than hoarding it. Over the next 3 months, I made similar arrangements. Small farmers, young families starting out, long-term tenants who'd proven their dedication. I sold them land at reasonable prices, creating new legacies instead of building my own empire. The remaining assets, the grain facility, the equipment business, the commercial properties, I consolidated into a smaller, manageable operation. I hired new management, young people with ethics and energy. And I kept control, making it clear I wasn't a figurehead to be managed, but an owner who expected respect and transparency. Liam's plea deal was finalized in April. No prison time, but 15 years probation, full restitution of the money he'd received, and a permanent ban from serving as an officer or director of any corporation. He'd moved to Arizona, I heard, working in a warehouse, divorced and broken. Wilma completed 200 hours of community service and paid a substantial fine. We spoke occasionally, carefully, rebuilding trust like mending a shattered vase. The cracks would always show, but the structure could hold. The grandchildren were the hardest part. Explaining to Emma and her siblings why Grandma had gotten Mommy in trouble, why Uncle Liam lived far away now, why Thanksgiving would never be the same. "Did they really try to steal from you?" Emma asked during one of our video calls. "They made bad choices," I said carefully. "Grown-ups sometimes do that." "But you're okay?" "I'm okay. I'm strong enough to protect myself. I want to be strong like you when I'm old." I smiled. "You don't have to wait until you're old. You can be strong now." On a warm day in May, almost 6 months after I'd stopped outside that conference room, I sat on my porch with a glass of lemonade and Hammond's final report. The FBI investigation was closed. All recoverable assets had been returned. Avery remained at large, but Interpol had her flagged. Liam and Wilma had completed their plea agreements. It was over. I looked at the house Robert and I had built, at the garden I'd tended for 40 years, at the fields visible in the distance. They'd tried to take this from me. They'd tried to convince the world, and perhaps themselves, that I was too old, too confused, too diminished to deserve control of my own life. They'd been wrong. Age wasn't decline. It was accumulation. I'd accumulated knowledge, experience, resilience, and the wisdom to know when to trust and when to fight. That accumulation had saved me when youth and aggression would have failed. My phone rang. Jennifer Cole, my attorney. "Mrs. Serrano, I wanted to let you know. The Legal Journal is doing a feature on elder financial exploitation. They want to interview you about your case, how you fought back. Would you be interested?" I thought about other women my age, other families where trust was being weaponized, other children who saw their aging parents as obstacles rather than people. "Yes," I said. "I'll do the interview." "Wonderful. They're particularly interested in your advice for others in similar situations." After we hung up, I thought about what I would say. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Don't assume incompetence comes with age. Fight back when necessary. Accept help, but on your own terms. But mostly, know your worth. That evening, I made pot roast again. Not for a family dinner, but for myself. I set the table with the good china, poured a glass of wine, and ate slowly, savoring each bite. Tomorrow, I'd go to the office. I'd review the quarterly reports, meet with the new management team, and make decisions about the company's future. But tonight, I simply sat in my home, secured by wit and will, and felt the quiet satisfaction of victory. Not the dramatic triumph of heroes in movies, but the real victory of a woman who'd refused to be erased. The phone rang again. Wilma. "Mom? I was thinking, maybe I could come by for dinner next Sunday. Just me and the kids. No pressure, no agenda, just family." I looked at the empty dining room, at the table that had seen so many meals, so many moments. "Come at 5, I said. "I'll make pot roast." "That sounds perfect." After she hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness and thought about bridges. How some burned completely, but others could be rebuilt. Slowly, carefully, with full awareness of the scars that remained. I didn't know if Wilma and I would ever truly recover what we'd lost. But we could build something new, something based on honesty and respect rather than blind trust. That, I thought, might be enough. Outside, The spring evening deepened into night. Inside, the house felt solid and safe, not just a structure of wood and stone, but a fortress I'd defended and won. I was Evelyn Serrano, survivor, businesswoman, mother, grandmother, and I was just getting started. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.